I want to start today's video with a hard question, something I want you to ask yourself as we journey deeper into the world of infinity. What if you knew for a fact that heaven, nirvana, bliss, or any kind of like transcendent reality, or whatever you want to call it, your afterlife, was factually real, not just a matter of faith, but scientific fact, and someone before you had been able to achieve it, and you can too? Okay, think about that for a hot second, and I want you to dwell on that while we follow up with our next question here, which is that what would you be willing to do in order to obtain it or to go there? How long would you and your people be willing to wait or work at it? What would you sacrifice? Right? If you knew heaven was real, what would you sacrifice? Money, morals, each other? Today we are continuing our introduction to the world of Infinity the Game by Corvus Belli. And in our last video we did a brief introduction to what's called the human sphere, that which we, as the readers, know and understand as our species and how we got there, and I'll put a link to that in the description down below. But today we're taking a step outside of the human sphere, talking about a faction that supersedes any specific race and how they play into this techno-dystopia that is the far future. They are the Combined Army, a single faction built upon the backs of multiple races and species, conquered, coerced, and led by a single intelligence. Not a hive mind per se, but a unifying direction and persona that swallows and incorporates any civilization it comes across in the cosmos. And we're going to start this discussion with the concept of transcendence. There is a popular concept that you can see in many science fiction works relating to this. And really what it is the next evolutionary step for a race, right? We start with our organic selves, then we dabble in constructs, think, putting your brain inside of a machine or a robot. But then there's that next level, where our consciousness evolves beyond the need for a body, beings of pure energy and maybe even light. It's some really far out there stuff and fascinating to think about, but this jump up the evolutionary chain would radically change a society. Time and space are vastly different to these kinds of beings with this different nature. You'll never taste the sting of death. You are immortal, powerful, and evolved. Achieving this transcendence has been the goal of numerous technologically advanced civilizations, and the truth is, most of them will never make it. It's a hostile galaxy, it's unforgiving, it's full of enemies and danger, but not only that, a lot of civilizations can't handle their own growth. They either die from a lack of natural resources, or they fall apart from the inside, as if there was if the nations in a given race start attacking each other and they kind of collapse together. That all being said, there is some evidence that some societies have achieved the true transcendence. Entire planets and sectors left absolutely empty. Their inhabitants now existing in dimensions outside of our own. The discovery of these forgotten civilizations is an ongoing motivator for those who are on their own quest for transcendence. Again, remember that first question, what if you knew heaven was real as a scientific fact? One such race that is on this quest for knowledge was the Ur, one of the earlier life forms to come out of the Big Bang. Their home is on the further edge of our galaxy, and they are a truly ancient people who call themselves, by their full title, the Ur Rationalists. Utterly devoted to the pursuit of science and technology, they are aggressive in their quest for transcendence. They were rash and impatient, and despite their best minds, they could not, crack the secret to jumping this evolutionary gap. They generally got along with all of their neighboring races that they were able to meet, but honestly, they're really focused on, moving their society in specific, forward up this evolutionary chain. And for generations, they tried just to do, regular research, what we would call, regular research, theorems and that kind of stuff. But after a while of just a lot of failures, generations of failures, they tried a different tactic, and they built an artificial intelligence to figure this mystery out. This was a civilization-wide undertaking. Huge deal, right? The idea was that this artificial intelligence could take in all the data that was learned before, things that even, the modern Ur scientists had forgotten from the past. Take all the information that the Ur had ever learned, combine it with any research that the AI could do itself, accrue the information, compute it, and deliver a route to transcendence to its creators. Alright, so they have a mind on the case that can think and process information far better than any team of mortal beings, and quickly, the artificial intelligence achieves its goal. It's able to understand transcendence in its entirety, right? What we're going to call total knowledge. When asked to elaborate further and describe the process of achieving this, the artificial intelligence was silent for a little while, and after a long pause, it gave the worst possible answer. It said the Ur were too immature and impatient. They were not ready to achieve transcendence. After that, the artificial intelligence shut down. It had literally transcended itself. Reviewing the programming, at some point, the artificial intelligence, when it achieved this total knowledge, was able to alter its own programming so it did not feel compelled to aid its creators in their pursuit. And this was devastating news, right? To work for generations at this just to be told, you're too immature. But the Ur rationalists were not about to give up. If a way existed, which again, this is just more proof that it can be done, they'd find it. And so they built a second intelligence. But this one was very different, right? If you don't know, artificial AI means artificial intelligence, a mind that is open and free of worldview and values. It's manufactured, right? Well, they didn't want that, because the last time they tried it, it had unlimited freedom and it turned on its creators, or at least didn't share the secrets they wanted with them. Instead, they built what they call an EI, Evolved Intelligence. It was designed from the ground up to be one of the Ur. It has their values. It developed a bond to its creators. It would never leave them. It was almost like they created this identity that was just an Ur, one of their race, just magnified with all this computing power. But understand that the artificial intelligence and the evolved intelligence are very different. The EI is more limited because it's also built with all of the drawbacks that come from being a part of an impatient and impetuous race. So although it tried to follow the lines of research that the AI had gone down, it was having trouble coming up with the answer to transcendence. It became clear after centuries of research that the EI was just too bogged down by the fears and immaturity and desires of the Ur. It was just one of them, again, but magnified. In essence, the evolved intelligence was itself what prevented it from achieving transcendence, right? But it wasn't built to conquer all the problems, morally with its race. It was built to research. And so it began a new line of inquiry. If this was the technological level where the irrationalists, topped out, right? This is as high as we can go. We can't figure it out because of some stupid reason about us being immature or something like that. What would the same system, the evolved intelligence, look like if it was based upon another race, right? I'll give you an example here. What if we conquered humans and had them build an evolved intelligence with all their strengths and all of their weaknesses? Could we compare these two and these two intelligences work together? And if we did that multiple times, all of us collectively could achieve transcendence. And so there was a shift from peaceful yet fruitless research to conquering militarism. If the Ur could not reach up to godhood, they would reach outward and conquer around them, forcing every race they find into building their own evolved intelligence. Every time they do so, gaining more and more insight into how to achieve transcendence. It gets them closer to that very elusive goal. Of course, all of these lesser evolved intelligence would be managed by the original made by the Ur. Of course, them seeing this sense of superiority. It's their experiment after all. And that central idea that we talked about in the beginning is what's created possibly the largest threat to humanity in the infinity setting. The Ur will approach an alien race. It will either absorb them peacefully or subjugate them by force. It'll have them build smaller evolved intelligences and incorporate them into this new collective of races that are pursuing transcendence. Together they form a single, combined army, which is where their name originates. Several races have been brought in through this manner. And then the latest target of the EI is the human sphere, a race that has achieved much in its relatively short lifespan. The vanguards and scouts have been sent forward, and this is really what we've seen in the Infinity setting. The main swarm or army hasn't even yet arrived, which is frankly a terrifying notion. And there are a number of races that have been incorporated already. There's the brutally strong Morats, the elusive and cunning Shazvasti, some elements of the Toha, and many others. And a lot of the things I just mentioned are really dedicated sub-factions that I'll go into in more detail in future videos. Each one of those is kind of like an army in its own right. But this is the story of the combined army as a whole, hell-bent on its sole task of achieving this evolutionary jump. But instead of doing so through developing peace and maturity like it was told to do, it has become a blight on the galaxy as it tries to absorb everything around it, to cheat its way into achieving what has eluded the Ur for centuries. Taking in all the races it comes across, using them, first on a micro level, by incorporating them into a single army of terrible efficiency, but then on a macro level of studying and stealing the very nature of those species to further the goals of the Ur. It's sinister, and I love it. Now let's talk, at the end of all these videos, I try to always address why I think this is cool. Ultimately, when it comes to wargaming, you just gotta step back and be like, man, that sounds cool. And this is what we're gonna do here, right? I think it's a story that really hits home these questions that I asked at the beginning, right? If heaven was real, what would you do to get in? And here we have a race that tried to do it, we'll say quote unquote, the nice way. But when that didn't work, their immaturity, which is what prevented them from achieving it in the first place, drove them to do horrible things. They wanted a good thing, but the way that they're getting there is awful and full of destruction. They sacrifice their morals, their troops, and their values to work at achieving that which they have not earned. And I think that makes them a great villain. I also really like the various races that make up the combined army, right? The Morats are these big red brutes, the Shazvasti, these like sleek infiltrators, and the idea that you take the best of each race on a practical level, troops, but also on like the philosophical and spiritual level, the forced evolutionary intelligence that they have. It seems like an imprisonment that we can't quite understand. And that doesn't even factor in the things that, every faction in this game pretty much has, which is like, implanting computers uplinks into your brain, and all of a sudden now you're kind of linked to the main computer, those kinds of things, where it's like how much of, when you're fighting, say, a specific, troop from the combined army, how much are you actually facing that racist troop, or how much of it are you actually directly fighting against the evolved intelligence? Like, how much of a connection is there? It's very interesting. It asks a lot of interesting questions about really what our pursuits are, what we're willing to sacrifice to get there, and also just the nature of our reality, because the evolved intelligence is an Ur, it is just magnified. And what would happen if they did conquer humanity and made the uber-human, right? Like the evolved intelligence of mankind. That would be insane. All in all, I find it a very fascinating thing. One thing that I will say is that the evolved intelligence makes a perfect, negative image, like the alternate color scheme for the Aleph, which is the human sphere's artificial intelligence that governs almost every aspect of human life in our future. I talked about that a little bit in the first video, but these two, completely artificial minds, one is just a straight up artificial intelligence, one is an evolved intelligence, have like these like very concrete conflicts with one another, and they both represent the spheres that they're trying to defend, right? The AI that we have, Aleph, it defends humanity like a human for the most part, and then also the evolved intelligence is just a big blown up Ur. And I find that really cool. So go ahead, tell me in the links down below, what is your favorite like sectorial or sub-faction of the combined army? And if you are a fan of Infinity, would you do me a favor and please share this video? It means the world to me as I begin getting more and more into the lore of this amazing game. For me personally, I love the Shazvasti. They're kind of these weird like bug, grasshopper looking dudes who are all about stealth and infiltration. You never know quite what you're shooting at in the game. They can like respawn kind of in a strange way. I think it's really cool. They don't have a whole lot of staying power, but man, they can deliver a pretty decisive blow really quickly in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing, which I am not one of. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching this. I hope that you are interested in Infinity. I love the setting. It is very interesting to me. And I'll see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.